Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown. I'm very pleased to announce a brand new weekly show called Back to the Call featuring Ronnie Nunn, who's a former NBA referee and also former director of officials for the NBA. And now he consults with NBA teams to help them understand why they're fouling too much. We're going to go through calls that you suggest every week and explain what's going into them and what's behind the rationale of the referee, and also give our opinion on whether or not they're the correct call or not. So don't forget to get out there on Twitter or Facebook or Google Plus or email or whatever you like and let us know which plays and what part of the game they occur. We'll look at them, and if we use them, we'll give you a big shout out. Let's look at our first clip, which we have Kevin Durant getting a delay of game after a made basket. Ronnie, tell us a little bit about what's happening here with the new emphasis on the rules this year.
Well, Coach Nick, one of the reasons of dealing with this delay of game after a made basket is the interrupting of the new offensive team to get the ball and get a maybe semi-fast break going up the other way. And I think it's a really good insertion of this new rule simply because the players have touched balls continually and thrown it to the official or tapped it in certain directions, which, by the way, was a delay of game prior. But now I think the non-touching of the ball, the holding of it, the redirection of it is really going to help the game move and continue this free-flowing movement concept. And I really think it's a good idea.
So let's look at the next clip, which we have a Ray Allen catching the ball after a Chris Bosh tip-in, yet he doesn't get called for it. So are you hearing anything about how they're trying to enforce this, and are they going to try and pick and choose their spots?
You know, the pick and choose their spots things is what gets everybody in trouble. And from what I see here, this is obviously a hold of the ball. And this touch should have been responded with a delay of game anyway, first delay of game. But that's something that should have been done, in my view.
With our next clip, we have an interesting call which doesn't happen often, which is standing out of bounds illegally on offense. We have Ed Davis, who's standing pretty much on the H of Memphis. Ronnie, tell us what the purpose of the rule is and exactly how you can get that infraction.
Initially, the rule concerning playing the game out of bounds had to do with being deceptive, and you just pop out and get a pass and nobody knew where you were. But in this case, the transition of this action has now become to stretch the defense out. And knowing that you can use, parameters beyond the boundaries, and then forcing your opponent to stick with you somewhere, and it kind of takes him out of the game too, but even though he's still on the court. So I think this is a real good violation rule where you can't use the court except for 94 by 50, and you got to play the game there. And players running after each other sometimes can take you out of bounds. But as long as you immediately come back on, you can play on. This is for situations where you're standing and staying out of bounds, not so much to deceive, because we're not seeing that, but to stretch the defense.
Let's move on to the crucial play at the end of the Hawks versus Lakers game, where Al Horford inexplicably dribbles the ball up the court and throws it to his point guard Teague after he had gotten into the front court.
This one is just a situation sometimes with bigs, I guess. They bring the ball up and now they want to get it to the guard and they didn't get it to him sooner. And the real issue here is where you establish your last location. That's your position. And Teague really establishes himself in the backcourt. And because he leaped from the backcourt and caught the ball in the air, he never established front court position. And because of that, he violated the midcourt stripe.
The funny thing as a coach was that Jeff Teague should never have let his big man dribble the ball up the court. He should have sprinted over there. If you watch closely, he kind of starts to walk. And had he just jogged or ran a little bit faster, he would have been in the front court anyway, and the ref never would have been in position to have to even call that. They wouldn't have turned it over, and you know what? They might have won the game. Well, let's move on to a really fascinating play where we had the Blazers playing against the Spurs, and we had LaMarcus Aldridge go to the hole hard. There's a lot of contact. It looks like it could have been either way, and after the refs confer, they end up calling a double foul. So this was very confusing to most people online talking about it. Give us some insight into how this kind of thing can happen where you could have a double foul and it's the right call.
Usually calls of this nature that are block charge are instantaneous. And what happened here with the officials is they both reacted emphatically as to what they thought the play was because each believed that play belonged to them. They owned it. And because they did that, they gave their signals. And obviously one, as you can see on the baseline, is creating a blocking call while the other turns and calls offensive. when you have a disagreement of officials on a call in this particular nature, where you don't have a first call or contact followed by a second contact, where you can differentiate it, the unbelievable block charge, double foul, which you hardly ever see. It's usually one way or the other. The key here is, and the conversation has to do a little bit more with the restricted area, because if you are in the restricted area, it can only be a block, whether you were moving or not. But if you're outside of the restricted area, that has to do with movement. And I think that's the discussion they're having. One is, was he in the restricted area? And then the other saying, well, we both have him out. Well, now we both have given a call, and to the purpose of the integrity of the game, one cannot overshine the other in that instance. What we really have here at the end is a double foul, which warrants, in this case, a jump ball at center court. And also, each player gets a personal foul, no team foul to the teams. And the clock is reset at 2:24, and we start the game as if we would start a game all over again at center court.
Now, on this call, we know he's out of the restricted area. Do you think that was a block or a charge?
This is a one big-time split-hair play. Several angles were needed to really look at it. If the scales tipped anyway, it really tipped to the blocking call, because there was a noticeable lateral movement on a couple of clips that showed lateral movement. And of course, a couple of others showed there wasn't any. But the ones that show it seem to appear that it's a block call. But you're really splitting hairs. And in all honesty, it's a good way to come out of it with a ruling of a double foul, because it's that close.
Let's move on to Chris Kaman, a spin move up, a pick and roll, and he gets a charge call called on him. Is this a good call, or what's your opinion?
This is really a good call. Kaman creates momentum for himself, but bigs that go in and then spin blindly, so the momentum really bounces him in. I think he even moves his feet, and it might be not a travel, but he sort of lost himself by getting onto his heels, and that momentum took him into the defender. And of course, where his catch was, the restricted area did not apply. So this is a regular block charge play after a catch. And here's one that tips the scales on an offensive foul.
Great call on the shuffling of the feet. It's not perfect footwork. And I'm sensing that when you're getting near the rim, perhaps the spin move isn't the best idea, because we often see this get called for a charge, whether or not it is or not. And I almost feel like maybe as a coach, we should go away a little bit from teaching the spin move, because it's too perilous for an offensive player.
This can happen to anybody, but I just think that players that are, have less of this height and could get into a plotty situation upon receiving a pass like that, have to be more cautious. Get it, take a look, go upward, find an angle to go in another fashion, but don't just go fluidly if you don't know what's behind you.
Let's move on to a quick little look at a Lance Stevenson drive to the hoop, where he gets a little bit of a karate kick going and gets a charge called without that much contact. So what's your take on this? What's the rule on that kind of a play, and was it a good call?
I would have believed that had he been able to slip his defender, he would have been fine. The problem was on this play is that he used his leg and it caught the defender's arm. He uses his right leg and catches the defender's arm, who's stationary and in place. And when you start using your leg and extend it out like so, this is not a basketball play. Had he slipped it more and been able to go more to his left, there might have been a no call and a play on. But in this case, the contact was there. The defensive player moved a little bit backwards because he was getting ready to receive the contact. It's very little, not enough to create a different kind of play. When defensive players are there, really, coach, players got to readjust and try to go upward instead of through. His continuation of trying to go through and slip him got him into trouble, because he did catch the arm with his own foot, and that's a very obvious play.
Well, let's move on to the Knicks versus the Timberwolves. It wasn't a very close game until the end. The Knicks were making a run, and this play helped them, where we see a charge called on a ball screen by Kevin Love. What are you seeing here, and do you agree with the call?
I don't agree with this call, and I'm not going to say that this is not a tough call, because most collisions that occur usually occur where the offensive player on setting screens is moving. And a lot of times they move sometimes to get ready to kind of absorb the contact. And sometimes they move a little bit to the right or to the left, or even sometimes a little forward. But in this case, it appears from this angle that Kevin Love is in position and he absorbs the contact from the defender into him. And don't forget, this play is really quick from the position of the official right here. He's got to read it a little bit sooner if he can. And you know, in some cases, like I said about the camera, there might have been some kind of movement he saw that we did not see. But as it's presented to us here, it appears that that he was established, allowing the defender to stop and change direction or go through the screen. And since he could stop because Kevin set the screen early enough, the responsibility now is with the defender. So I think he established it first, and this was a call that needed to be made, and it should have been on the defense.
So let's look at the final play we have for this show, which was actually a bit controversial and strange, and I know Lakerland was relieved at the outcome. So let's look what happens here. Pau Gasol going hard to the rim in a tie game at the end of the game, and a collision happens. What do you see here? And walk us through the play and what the referees had to do to figure out what the call was.
Well, this is another instance where a block charge play has to do something with the restricted area. So there's a chance to, you know, talk about it in terms of that line. That's where the discussion is. You know, on block charge plays, one official usually has the angle and the responsibility to get that play. But when you're dealing with a restricted area play, the restricted area plays can now be reviewed, chatted about, and discussed, and come up with a decision. So now it's just a regular block charge play, and that official is going to stay with his decision if he believes the player moved. And in this case, I'd have to say to you, the player does move. He has a wide stance, you notice, on the defensive pickup of this move by Gasol. And when players square up, they change the vertical positioning of their body. And where they were once with their stomach into their chest, you know, right through the chin is legit. A lot of defensive players try to get more than they need and allow for creativity by that offensive player. Those tough shots are tough even for some of the great players we've had. They make some of them, but they miss them too. But if you're going to go and try to get that secured player where I'm going to stay with him and get that charge, you may in fact get the block. And I thought the reaction by the official was excellent on a blocking call.
So are you allowed to review a block or a charge? Or you can overturn that by looking at the review?
When it is in the restricted area in the last 2 minutes of the game. It's one of those last 2 minutes of the game options that can be used with instant replay. And that is the only reason why you would go to the instant replay monitor to see this particular line. And if he's out of it, then you're really making a block charge call separate of what this shows you, because you've already made a decision before you go to the camera review. The officials come together and they must have an on-floor decision. And because of that on-floor decision, if anything else fails, they have the old-fashioned on-court position and on-court decision to make that call.
Well, Ronnie, I really appreciate you joining us. I think we did shine a light into the abyss of what people assume are calls and what are not. I think it's an important discussion to have, and we're going to have this as often as we can. So thanks for joining us. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Ronnie?
I'm in. Thanks for having me.
You got it.